Greetings, y'all. Today, I want to discuss something that's near and dear to my heart, and that is the state of affairs in the third world, which includes countries like my country, the Bahamas, but it also extends to countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, right? And so, in the region that the Bahamas is situated in, people generally call it the Caribbean, but the Bahamas is northwards of the Caribbean. It's still basically in the general vicinity of the Caribbean. But what we all can say, just looking over the decades of development in these types of countries, is that there used to be a more pronounced predator and prey relationship between countries like the Bahamas and the Western world, and also European countries in general. All right, and we see that this relationship persists even unto today, in which there's still a heavy dependency on foreign aid and also on foreign trade. Okay, so well, when we look at countries like our countries, firstly, the notion of first world and third world was created by European countries, right? And my country and countries in the Caribbean, countries in Africa are considered third world because of access to potable water, high rates of poverty and disease, economic development, um, low life expectancy. These types of factors are what are considered before a label of third world is placed on a country, right? Now, third world countries all happen to be countries which were under European imperialism for a period of time. In fact, the country was formed, the name of the country and the borders of the country were established during colonialism, right? So, firstly, we're talking about a situation in which the dynamics were created by European countries, and they were then subsequently labeled by European countries for having these characteristics, you know. So they will create the characteristics and then still label you as being basically the bottom of the barrel in terms of economic development and social development. Okay, so I even can recall recently that even Donald Trump called countries like Haiti and other countries in the region a shithole, right? Now, what we can say, we know how these dynamics came about, right? And I want to discuss something that emerged from this paradigm that I think has not had the benefit of full discussion in my region. It's discussed in think tanks in European countries, but we refuse to acknowledge these dynamics in the developed world. Okay, and I'm talking about the way Europe underdeveloped the third world. Okay, Europe actually underdeveloped the third world over a period of time which extends from the formation of the country to the present day. Okay, now there was a position paper, a research paper from Professor Walter Rodney, which is online. You can download the PDF of a number of Walter Rodney's essays, his research papers. But in the research paper, Walter Rodney described the way in which Europe underdeveloped the continent of Africa in particular, right? And what he really referenced was the fact that there was a predatory trade relationship, which still exists today, in which Europe buys excessive amounts of raw materials of all forms from the continent, processes these raw materials, and sells finished goods to the continent at high and exorbitant rates. Okay, so It's a trade relationship which was beneficial only to Europe and was very harmful to the long-term development of the continent of Africa, right? And what I contend is that these dynamics also exist in the Bahamas, the Caribbean, and by extension, black communities around the world. How did we arrive at such a poor social and economic condition if we were actually being facilitated, if our growth was being fairly facilitated? How did we arrive at economic and social conditions of degradation that we experience today? Okay, now in the Bahamas, in terms of financial services, this predatory trade relationship has been going on for many years. Our country has been a tax haven for tycoons and wealthy people around the world. So this is something that we can say we all experience, okay? But I would like to consider the fact that this underdevelopment, which has been sustained over this period of time, was actually continued because of the independence struggles which took place in our history, allowing for us to be autonomous countries. As soon as we actually made a decision to make a break with the European ties, the ties with the first world country that was basically enslaving our countries, when this process was complete, many of these first world states that were the old colonial regime actually decided to sabotage these countries by removing all aid and all infrastructure that was beneficial. Now in the Bahamas, we had an exodus of some of the colonial regime. Many of them still remain here, but in countries like Africa, they actually removed clinics, equipment from the clinics. They removed equipment from government offices. They removed equipment from schools. They basically sabotaged the infrastructure before leaving because we decided to make a break with them. Okay? Now, what are the ideological underpinnings of this environment that allows this systemic inequality to take place? How is it being persisted without there being an in-your-face, literal oppressor in your face creating your conditions for you, right? The fact is, they left us with an economic model that is sure to sustain the inequality. This economic model is capitalism. Now, capitalism has been touted as successful in first world states, but capitalism has actually destroyed third world developing states, right? As Professor Walter Rodney said in his breakdown of the first world and third world characteristics, he said that in the third world, or the so-called developing states, there is a perception that the countries are developing towards developed status. There is a perception that developing is a temporary label and that these countries are in a stage of development that will one day arrive at the status of the first world countries. Now, this is the greatest illusion that has ever been told in terms of the economies of the world. This is the greatest illusion that has ever been perpetuated, because this term developing is a somewhat permanent label. Okay, if it is being touted as a label by comparison, there are light years of differences between the first world and the third world. Okay, as we make small incremental advances, the third world is making leaps and bounds. So if this label is being given to us by comparison, there's never going to be a situation in which there is an equal distribution of power and influence in geopolitics. But countries like our countries are belittled on purpose and allowed to continue in the muck and the mire, in the high incidences of crime, poverty, disease, You see what I'm saying? And so basically, capitalism is a model in which private entities control the political landscape and the economic landscape, right? Here it is. If this is the case, look at the situation that develops as a result of private entities controlling the state and the resources. And there are areas in the country that are permanently impoverished. They are systemically ignored and denied the public funding that can help them to arrive at a better condition. So we're just looking at the Bahamas in particular as a microcosm of the global economy, right? In which there are first world states and developing states, right? Rich countries, poor countries. Well, on one island in the Bahamas, there are rich citizens and there are poor citizens, right? There are scarce resources in the economy, and so the wealthy will do all that is in their power to maintain a grip on the majority of the resources, okay? Because if there's any more broadening of access to these resources, then they would lose their social position in the hierarchy, okay? So we have a situation in which poverty and opulence live side by side on one island, okay? So if we consider it, this is not just a dynamic that exists between countries by chance. This is an economic and social model that perpetuates wealth inequality, wage inequality, resource inequality, education inequality. And so I just wanted to mention that there's a dynamic that exists which is beyond our control as long as we continue to assist its growth and its development. We facilitating this inequality by participating in it on that level. If we just consider LeBron James made an act of philanthropy to open a school in America, provide free college tuition to the graduates, free uniforms, free meals, and transportation, right? And it literally takes acts of philanthropy to make an impact on the inequality. It is not designed to address itself. It is designed to continue perpetuating inequality, poverty, and disease. And without acts of philanthropy, the poor literally are left to their own devices. So what I would say is we need more acts of philanthropy, but I don't think the acts of philanthropy address what is the systemic problem. The systemic problem is that the philosophy of the economy is wrong. The philosophy of the society is wrong. Okay? And this model of hoarding wealth creates poverty. In order for you to live in your opulent lifestyle, somebody has to be literally starving. Okay? Because if they had more access to the economy, this person in the opulent lifestyle would not be able to live that way. Okay? So, there are other dynamics, that come into play, but I would just like to mention this. So, let me know what your thoughts are about any of what I had to say. Give me your opinions. Am I right? Am I wrong? Can you qualify? Can you add some details to what I'm saying? Let me know what your thoughts are, especially from the Bahamas, especially from the continent of Africa, especially from the Caribbean nations, especially from the black communities and all of the other nations of the world. Let me know what your thoughts are. How can we address this? Can we actually create an egalitarian society, a classless society? Is that the solution? Let me know what your thoughts are. One love.